Okay, welcome everybody. Today's topic of this workshop is the Satir model and family constellations. I wonder if you're watching this or hearing this, if you're in a helping profession, if you already know about the Satir model, if you already know about family constellations, or it's all new to you. So I encourage, if it's new to you, to explore these two topics separately, because both are full of interesting insights and ideas for you personally and professionally. Today's workshop is about combining these two tools, which are effective in their own way, to create a new integrative tool for helping people. And if you're in a helping profession, you can use this tool for individual work, also in group work. And it has helped me personally and professionally, and I feel very loyal to both these models or tools, because I studied both the Satir model and the Constellation model. With one is Virginia Satir led, one is Bert Hellinger led. Bert was a big influencer on the way how I work. I studied with him in Germany and Austria, and his wife for quite some time. And I've evolved some of the tools. So what I'm going to show and share today is a bit of a fusion combination. And I believe this is where the interesting parts happen, because it's the adjacent areas. When we combine something, we find a little spark, little magic, little something wonderful. As well as we follow pure models, that's fine. If they're research-based, if they're scientifically proven, and both of these models were ahead of their time. We didn't have a lot of neuroscientific research then to prove that they worked, but they did work in so many anecdotal evidence and case studies. We know it from the numerous workshops, retreats, and seminars that both Virginia Satir and Bert Hellinger conducted. And when I looked at both of these tools, I figured that they're very similar, and I was very curious, how come they are so similar? And then when I went to this workshop of Bert Hellinger, I realized from the interactions that some of the work that Bert had learned was from a student of Virginia Satir. And at that time, Virginia was working on the family reconstruction process. It was a lengthy process of changing the dynamics and relationships within a family. Virginia believed that we are not individuals making changes. We are part of a bigger system, a family that is making a bigger impact on our behavior and our change process than what we believe, what we think. We think that individually we can change if we want to, but she involved the full system. She worked with a mama and papa and siblings and relatives, and invited everybody to the table, invited everybody to the circle to see how these dynamics, these patterns influence. And it's true that they do influence us, because we are connected to the family we come from, and we create families and individual relationships based on patterns that we've learned from the family of origin. And Bert Hellinger was very curious as himself. He was a Gestalt therapist at that time, and he also went to Africa to work with the Zulu tribes to actually convert them into Christianity. He was a priest at that time and also therapist. And to his surprise, not only he didn't convert them, but he learned from them. The Zulu African tribes taught him the ancestral roots, the ancestral power of connecting to the family as a system, and looking at some of the elements that happen and go through generation to generation. And he created a method called the Family Constellation. It's literally, if you think of a family as a constellation of stars, where they're positioned, how the stars are related to each other. Family members are also have a certain positioning towards each other, and they have a sense of space in between them, mentally, emotionally, even physically. as well as a thought process and kind of relationship in between them. So when he started looking at it, how to use that as a projection, as a tool to work with the insides of the people, the psychology, he started working in a group setting where different people would represent different family members. And that was a very similar approach how Virginia did the family reconstruction, where people from her workshops would take positions or roles of the star's family members. So, for example, the star or the client had a mother and a father. So she would pick a person from the audience who would represent the mother and who would represent the father of this client. And she would position them in a certain relation to each other. She would use her communication stances. She would use her ways of communicating and relating. We know, for example, the tool called 5 Freedoms, or 5 rules that people have in their families to say or not to say the truth, to take risks or not to take risks, to be able to express feelings and thoughts or not being able to express feelings and thoughts, things like that. And they would exaggerate, they would represent using their body, using their language, using their mimicking expressions, sometimes even dressing up in those characters. She would add different modalities, different tools to that process. For example, she could also use parts party process, like we have different parts of ourselves. So, for example, we inherit a part from our mother, or we inherit part of our father, and she would combine these parts with representation. So very similarly, Bert also worked with groups of people, and he would ask these group participants to represent certain parts of a person, family, or persons in a family, internally family system. Now, I looked at it from kind of more big picture, conceptual way, and started combining both approaches. And what I'm about to share with you is a way how I work nowadays, not just personally and face-to-face with groups, when we have retreats, when we have workshops, live workshops, but also online. And this is a very curious exercise, because I didn't believe that this work can be done online. It's very experiential, it's very kinesthetic. I like to actually see the person in full body shape and form, to be able to come closer to the body, to move, to change the position, to sculpt the body. That's also something Virginia Satir used to do. She would ask the person to take a position according to the communication stance, whether it's a placating position, apologizing, or whether it's a blaming position, or it's a super reasonable position, a different way how the body would be sculpted. And that would also relate to the whole family sculpt, or how the mother used her communication tool or coping stance, or a father. And we would see this as almost like a family picture, as a family Play-Doh or theatrical sort of picture or performance, even a dance. And it would be exaggerated position of people. Now, Bert didn't do the exaggeration. He actually preferred that people use their senses and use their intuition to have a neutral kind of body stance, just standing and listening to their inner desire, inner need, and either say a word of what they were feeling and sensing, and or maybe a word that they were thinking, or where they wanted to just be, the position of their body. Now, that is very useful for the work online, because we can use some representation figures or representation forms just to depict the body position, or the body sensation, what the person tells us. So it's a very interesting integrative solution, where we can use both the left and the right parts of our hemisphere, not just logical figures and facts, but also creative part, that's connected to colors, connected to shapes and forms and intuition, and how we are just feeling about our feeling is something Virginia Satir loved to ask. How do you feel? And then she would ask, how do you feel about feeling that way? So this is all in conceptual sort of terms. Let's just look into a little bit of examples and case studies, how this can actually work in real life. And it's interesting that we learn the best from seeing other people's stories and life case studies. It's very hard to conceptualize what I've just shared because it's highly experiential work. So in order to illustrate and demonstrate, and of course we don't have yet, the demonstration with because of the confidentiality reasons. So the names have been changed of these clients of mine and the group work that we did online. But we can see the dynamic. We can see a little sort of tip of the iceberg of what was going on and how this work can help you if you choose to find a facilitator, for example, for a family constellation or family reconstruction. If you find one, I encourage you to do your family reconstruction because Virginia Satir left a legacy for us. This process shifts and changes the trajectory of our life, our behavior. It changes the way how we interpret events, interpret ourselves. It boosts our self-esteem and also immune system. Now that we know what happens inside our body, chemical-wise, processes, neuroscience supports this way, experiential way of healing, of learning things about ourselves. Now we know what happens inside our brain, inside our body, when we project our fears, our insecurities, when we talk about them in a way that's safe, when we create that level of trust and safety with a facilitator, with ourselves, with our parts, when we heal ourselves, when we just allow ourselves to be vulnerable, to look into some of the inner workings of our body, inner workings of our family systems, when we can shift the way how we perceive ourselves, and we also can shift the way how we were placed or how we thought we were placed in a family system. Because the way how we think we are within our family and in relation with our family members influences the way how we feel about ourselves, okay? The way how we feel about ourselves influences the way how we behave, the choices we make, our self-esteem, self-worth. It influences the relationships we make and how we make them. It influences everything in our life. So changing the perspective on ourselves and our position within our family, but also with some of those challenging bits, we heal. That's the magic of this process. It's a therapeutic, beautiful modality. And we're learning more and more about it because it's so deep, because it's so experiential. It takes some time to actually get all the science behind it. But some processes have already been established, researched, evidence-based, and now we're putting this together as a mix, as a fusion, and do some research on it. So let me share my screen so I could talk about this and share my slides. Hope you can see them. If not, I encourage you to see the recording and then you can see the slides, hopefully. So the workshops and the model of this combining the Satir and family constellation, I call it systemic repatterning. And it's all about experiential transformations. This work happens on many levels, and the most beautiful piece of work is through the 7-day retreats that we run. And it's all about looking beneath and understanding, being curious of who are we? Who are we beneath who we had to become when we were growing up in the family systems, with our parents, with our siblings, with all the caretakers and teachers we had in our life, and of course our peers. It's based on the Satir also iceberg model that we use, where we see the behaviors as the tip of the iceberg above the water. But actually, all the change about the behavior happens first underneath that water level. And we want to dig deep. We want to go through the feelings and perceptions and beliefs. We want to get to the expectations and values and yearnings and get to the bottom of the iceberg, where our self energy, our self-worth, our self sort of source energy is. And once we tap into that, we change our position. The iceberg changes, it melts, it transforms, it comes to the surface. It just beautiful to see what happens. The person changes and becomes a new person. So how do we do this? Is systemic enrichment process and systemic repatterning. Yeah, systemic enrichment is sort of the broader process. It includes the enriched system, you probably heard. So all these different steps, and repatterning is a very much part of today's discussion. How do we do this combination of satir work and family constellation? So I'm going to share a few examples, and they're very simple. So you will see these shapes on the screen. So for example, we had a case of Maria. Let's call her Maria. Maria had an issue with a relationship with her father, and mainly with her mother. And she was single all her life, and she couldn't find a partner. Now, she tried many things, okay, dating, and she realized that there was not good enough person for her. So she became single, but she wanted to have a child. She wanted to create a family. And when we met, it was an interesting process how she discovered that her relationship with her father was so estranged. So there was so much disconnection. But in her mind, he was kind of, the ideal man, that no other man was good enough to be like her father. And because she was her father's sort of daughter when she was young, she had that ideal carried on into her adulthood, although she had no relationship with her father. Okay, her father had another family. He divorced her mother, and he created a different focus in his life, and he didn't even communicate with Maria. Now, when we did the piece of work, what was missing when I asked her, what do you feel you want as like this yearning piece? She said, well, I've heard about this gratefulness, that I don't feel grateful. I don't feel like there's almost like this emptiness. And I know that this is a source of energy that I don't have. So when I asked her to draw or give me some signs of what kind of color, what kind of shape, what kind of size this gratefulness would be in relation to her and her family members, as you can see on the screen, she drew sort of the oval and put a orange color to it. And she positioned her father and mother in relation to her and the gratefulness, as you see. So the father a bit further looking outside, a mother behind her looking towards a similar direction like her father, but very far from each other. And there's this gratefulness in the middle between Maria and her father, and Maria is looking towards her father. So there are three important sort of factors in this work: how big these parts are, how positioned they are towards each other, sense of direction, and the colors and the shapes, right? And so the gratefulness, when you look at it, it's almost like this color of the sunshine. And when she put that gratefulness, she said, I felt this sort of warmth inside me. Although he's far, I feel he's kind of close to me. And when I have that orange or yellow gratefulness next to me, I feel like we're, back into the when I was younger, when I was a little girl, and he was always with me, and connecting to that part of hers allowed her to sort of soothe and make it softer, make herself softer towards the other gender. She was looking for a male partner, and what male partners reported, what she told me, what they were saying to her is that she was too cold. She was just not, they couldn't make her happy. They were not good enough. They felt like not man enough to be with her. So they would, that now we call it ghosting, disappeared. They didn't feel good next to her. And after this work, just doing that piece of reconstruction, piece of projection of herself and her relationship, her patterns on a piece of paper electronically, with this element that she was longing for, that feeling of gratefulness, allowed her to look at herself from a different perspective, from a different position. And although her father was still having this different family and he was not with her anymore, she changed the way how she related to him and hence related to other men in her life. So soon after, she was meeting a new partner. And instead of being cold and closed up and expecting a lot and criticizing, she was a little bit more grateful. That's what it takes, that little ingredient change in the recipe to make a dish really tasty. So that's a little case of Maria to share with you. Another case is a different shape and form, but again, there are some elements of family reconstruction from Virginia Satir, some elements from Family Constellation, and this is a way of moving, I call it, towards a place of better, to a better place. So a case of Ira, for example, who had a problem with her self-worth. Again, a relationship with the father was an issue. A lot of the time when we talk about relationship, a lot of these relationship patterns go back to the family of origin. Relationship, for if it's a woman, we're talking about relationship with the father. So here she drew herself as a sunshine. She's full of positivity, very nice image, although her self-worth in the present moment, she put in a gray color, quite a big, chunky part next to her father, who is not looking at Ira. But what is important and what we know is that our self-worth, if we depict it in a very sort of dark color, it's something that is not helping but draining. Okay, so the colors also represent, we have an intuitive feel towards certain colors. So if it's a gray and black, it's something to look into. Okay, and it's spontaneously coming to our mind. So if I ask, for example, you to depict how you depict your self-worth, the first color that comes to mind, I would like you to put. And then when I asked Ira to create her desired future, how would she like her self-worth, her confidence to be? What kind of color would she like it to be? And she put that color as a more sort of yellow, brighter, more orangey, like herself in the present moment. And she positioned that self-worth closer to herself. It was touching almost. She was like connected to it. Again, spontaneously. And the depiction or representation of that in the future, when I ask, how do you feel about this kind of relationship with her, with your self-worth, her answer was something along the lines of, well, I feel stronger. I feel there's something very powerful to hang on to. It's almost like my friend. We are the same color, we're different shape, but we are relying on each other, and it's easier to connect in that self-worth piece. If you can see it, it's connecting to the figure of the father. Now, what it does is that sometimes and actually many times girls, when we grow up, our fathers, being masculine fathers, they praise girls and actually praise everybody based on deeds, on actions. What good have you done? And if you've done something good, they say, oh, good girl, or oh, great, I'm really proud of you, you've achieved this. Now, this is a great fuel for growth for boys, because boys love testosterone-led appraisal for their deeds. It's almost like, okay, I've done this chore, I've earned my brownie point, I've earned my position in the hierarchy. Oh, I can elevate, I can surpass, and I climb the hierarchy ladder. In a girl's brain, which is more estrogen-led, there's no hierarchy. Everything is interconnected. So the praise, when the girl is praised on deeds, she thinks that she needs to do this kind of thing to earn the respect and appreciation and confidence all the time. If my father only appreciates and loves me for what I do, I have to just do that all the time, which is impossible. And that's why I feel so bad about myself. The girls are thriving when we are praised on our characteristics, on our personality traits, on our overall kind of roundedness. So when they say, oh, you're such a intelligent girl, you're such a caring girl, you're such an ambitious or curious girl, that's a fuel for a female brain, estrogen-led brain. So most fathers don't know it. Nobody teaches our fathers how to communicate, how to praise daughters. So naturally, we're all grown to either thrive or wither away on praise based on deeds. And that's why it's so hard for us to get our self-esteem high or self-worth high and confidence high. We're still in the patriarchal societies in most countries. We're still fighting for our rights, for our needs to be met, for our fair pay, for our fair respect. And we're still fighting because generationally, women have been in a different kind of position because of this kind of systemic issues and systemic upbringing problems. So in order for us to get our self-worth, we need to do this kind of work, systemic work, when we change our relationship to our father in our head and raise our self-esteem, even on this piece of paper or electronically or in our brain, in our imagination, because we know when we use our imagination, when we do this work, it actually changes the way how we're wired. Our neurology changes, our electromagnetic wiring is changing, our physiology changing, and we change the way how we behave. The whole iceberg shifts. So that's a case of era for you, a slightly different way of depicting this work visually. Another case of Donna. Now here we have a more more players, more complex situation of the present, where Donna had problem with her sleep, and she couldn't sleep well. She had insomnia that was connected to her fear, and she positioned fear sort of behind the sleep in this bright red color. And the sleep was very important. It's almost like overarching her life. She was just thinking about lack of sleep all the time. Her mother and father are a bit far from her. There was the brother who was almost in front of her, and her husband on the side. And interesting, like if you look at this from a visual perspective, you always notice different colors. And in this picture, her husband was depicted in the same red color as the fear. How? Coincidence? Maybe not. So as we explored what was the connection, Donna mentioned that it was her fear that she was not living her life to the fullest, being with this husband she felt stuck with, and she was just with him because of her children. And once the children grow to the adulthood, she wants to leave, but she's afraid because all the money was earned by her husband, and her sleep was just an unconscious reaction of the stress-induced, fear-based state of, I want to leave, but I don't know how to leave. How can I survive? I am almost 50. I haven't worked as because I looked after children. He's the main breadwinner. If I leave, how can I survive, etc. If I stay, I'm dying, and sort of like emotionally and mentally, I'm not happy. Very interesting and very common situation for many, again, women who have that sleep problem. So when I asked Donna to position and draw a scenario of this, a new family constellation or new system with all these different elements of how the future she would like to have, and that's a very important process of even thinking about how this we would like. I mean, we rarely think about the problem, how we would like it to be. Normally, when we have a problem, we just think about that problem and what it does to us. We just exacerbate, and we think about that problem, and we kind of keep playing the same record. So in order for us to shift, we just need to create a new scenario, a new future where we allow ourselves to dream, allow ourselves to create a new constellation and repattern the way how we think. And interestingly, the sleep changed the color and the shape and the position. So Donna was again in pink color, but her sleep was behind her in a sort of perpendicular shape with a white kind of color. And her husband, although he was in red, he moved a little bit further from Donna, and Donna moved a little bit further, and she put a new partner in front of her, instead of thinking about her brother and focusing on something different. She wanted to focus her energy on finding the new partner instead of worrying and playing again and again that record of like, oh, poor me. So that work allowed Donna to start thinking about a plan B, an escape plan from her current relationship where she's not happy. And we still will find out. As far as I know, she's still with her husband, but she's making plans. She has created a new project work-wise for herself to become independent financially. She has allowed herself to dream and to talk with her husband about possibly having a different place of living, sort of like having that more open relationship. And her sleep improved. So although she still is structurally in the same marriage, her whole construct of sleep relationship changed and her fear disappeared. And that is the work that everybody can do with the help of a paper and a facilitator. So very powerful. I encourage, it's just the fingertips. Everybody can do it online, and especially if you can do it face-to-face. Another case is of Clara. Clara had that sense of lack, that she was lacking, something that in her life was lacking, and she didn't know what. And she has a sister, and her father and her mother. Mother is very much like a helicopter kind of mother, looking after everybody, helping everybody. And the father and sister, they're very active, but Clara was lacking initiative. She was just lacking something, she didn't know what. And when she did the reconstruction work, the constellation work, she positioned these members of her family in sort of inwards rather than outwards. So the direction was they were all looking at each other. Literally, it could be people representatives, or it could be like little pieces of paper. In this piece of work, it was electronic. She just positioned different shapes, and they were looking at each other. And that sense of community, sense of family, sense of wholeness became so strong that she did not experience anymore a sense of lack. And instead of feeling lonely and on her own looking elsewhere to find that missing piece, she looked inside her family system to draw and connect with her sister, to have the resourcefulness of her mother, And also she reconnected with her father just by a phone call, just by imagining they're having a good conversation and focusing on a good conversation in that conversation. It allowed the conversation to be positive. So little efforts, little change of mind or perspective can make a huge difference in the way how things work. And what happened afterwards, this was the follow-up session. So once she looked inwards, there was this, instead of the lack, Clara created a sense of abundance that was so large that was also bringing this child, the partner, stable family, security home, and there was this kind of a funky element of crazy fears that was connected to the lack, and that crazy fears were moving away. So again, it's just a way of playing or working like a little puzzle of different parts, and changing the representation dynamics, changing these patterns, we can change the way how we relate to ourselves and become more peaceful, become more abundant, become more open-minded, become more curious, more relaxed, more agile, more focused, more clear, whatever that yearning is. And the final one is the case of Maggie, who wanted to have more commitment, but something was not working, in terms of commitment. And it's a very subtle and interesting case because the commitment stays in the same position. It just changed the color, and it also changed the relationship of her brother Michael, moving towards that commitment. This is a family business case. And then her father moving slightly towards more commitment, and the Maggie changed from green to yellow. And that family system, I mean, for me, I didn't know which one was better, but for Maggie, that felt like a better place to be. And it felt like more pieces of a puzzle were connected better in that grand scheme of things. And Maggie felt her sense of commitment increased in the romantic relationship. So changing and playing and working with the family of origin increased and changed her commitment, and finding a more committed partner in an adult romantic partnership that she was looking for. Okay, there's one more of Sally. But again, this is just a change of direction that I mentioned to you. Similar to Maggie, Sally also positioned a different father direction, away towards, and herself from away to towards, ability to see, and ability to see of Sally, and ability to see of her father, who she was, rather than what she did, was good enough to shift something in her sense of identity and position herself differently in the romantic partnership with men out there. So that's what I wanted to share with you, just visually, how this work can shapeshift some of the processes and dynamics that we have during our life. Very curious, very interesting way of working, not a talking therapy, not even, coaching or psychodynamic therapy, psychoanalytic therapy, or Gestalt even, not that, but just changing the representation, that Satir model with the iceberg, with a bit of tools. Of course, every case takes maybe an hour and a half, or sometimes 2 hours. So we just whiz through it. But I would like to invite you to explore this kind of tool so you can either equip yourself professionally or heal yourself personally, or maybe both. So thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And please connect, and please connect to your parts and your family members. So with that, I finish this talking part. Thank you.